I hope everyone is having a wonderful Christmas day. And since this is Christmas Day, it seemed like the perfect time to talk about the 7 biggest misconceptions about Christianity. So this is stuff that it's things I've always heard and keep hearing, but things that are just obviously not true. And it's so obvious, even I can see they're not true. Hey, that's saying something. I mean, I'm not exactly a biblical scholar here. And the reason for this, myself, I'm a Christian. A lot of you aren't. It isn't nearly as popular as it once was. And hey, each to their own, that's okay. But I just want to make sure that the things a lot of you are thinking or believe about Christianity, that they're not based on misconceptions about Christianity. So let's just jump into this and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about here. The first misconception about Christianity and Christians is that Christianity or Christians are somehow anti-science. Yeah, I wanted to start with this one because this one is just so obviously not true. Well, it's just the easiest one for me to start with. And I say this is obviously not true just based on the sheer number of contributions made to the field of science by Christians in overwhelmingly Christian nations. Copernicus, Galileo, Newton, they were all Christians. So, how on earth could anybody say that Christians or Christianity is anti-science? Now, a lot of people are going to say, oh, the Catholic Church, they did some bad stuff way back when. And okay, fair enough. The Catholic Church made a few mistakes. They made some pretty big mistakes here and there. Keep in mind, though, they've been around for pushing 2,000 years here. Yeah, they were going to make a few mistakes along the way. And I would also add that the mistakes made by the Catholic Church when we start talking anti-science or anti-knowledge, anything along those lines, those mistakes were not made because of religion. They were made because of politics. Now, I know here in our modern times when we're so dependent upon science to help us with things like the pandemic, I know it's just absolutely unimaginable that politics could somehow hinder science. But hey, it has been known to happen. Just saying. And if we look at the mistakes the Catholic Church made, every one of them were due to politics. And the Catholic Church became an extremely powerful political institution along with being a religious institution after the collapse of the Roman Empire. But the Catholic Church also did some pretty good things, like the preservation of knowledge and literacy itself after the collapse of the Roman Empire. As a matter of fact, the Catholic Church pretty much held Western civilization together after the collapse of Rome. Yeah, they've done some pretty good stuff too, and if we're going to look at the bad, we need to acknowledge the good. But Christians and Christianity, there's no way anybody could say that they're anti-science, given, again, the contributions made by Christians to science. Okay, now what I'm really curious about is how come it keeps being perpetuated in modern popular culture that Christians are anti-science. I'm really curious about that one. Perfect example, the television show, The Big Bang Theory. Most of you have seen that. It's a funny show, and the main characters, most of them are just brilliant mathematicians and physicists. None of them are Christian. Matter of fact, the show kind of pokes fun at Christians in a very respectful way, a very funny way too. But none of the smart people are Christians. And that's because in modern popular culture, you can't show smart people, geniuses, as Christians. Well, that would be sacrilege in modern popular culture. Okay, but that's the make-believe TV popular culture world. Now let's look at the real world. Okay, in the actual real world, reality and facts. The Big Bang Theory itself, the theory from physics that the show is named for. was created by a brilliant mathematician and physicist who also happened to have been a Catholic priest. Seriously. And then his theory was confirmed soon thereafter by Edwin Hubble. Now, the priest was Monsignor Lemaitre, and I know I'm not pronouncing his last name correctly, but I find it interesting. Almost all of us have heard of Edwin Hubble, or at least Hubble, the Hubble telescope. Almost none of us have heard of Monsignor Lemaitre. All right, so we've heard of the guy that confirmed the theory. We haven't heard, or most of us haven't heard of the guy that developed the theory. And then again, popular culture, the television show itself, the smart people, oh, they can't be Christians. Christians are anti-science. But then the very theory from physics that the show was named after was created by a Catholic priest. Oh yeah, the Catholic priest, they encourage, or the Catholic Church, they encourage their priests to pursue science and knowledge. They want them educated. They're not anti-science. So anyway, I think, we've covered that one as just a really big misconception. Second big misconception about Christianity and Christians, that Christians are just a bunch of hypocrites. So you got the preacher preaching on Sunday, don't do whatever bad behavior, and a week later he's caught in a scandal. Okay, this one might be true. I'm sorry. Us Christians are a bunch of hypocrites. That one's true. But here's the thing. Us Christians, we're human. And to be a hypocrite, I think, is just part of human nature. And when us Christians are being hypocrites, it's in spite of Christianity, not because of it. The Bible, it clearly says, don't be a hypocrite. And for me personally, okay, I was raised a Christian, and as a teenager, I went off rebelling, and so I was your typical teenager, rebel without a pause. And then in my 20s, I started questioning everything, even Christianity. Well, then, along about 30, I finally read the Bible. All right, so I heard all these things about Christianity and Christians and this, that, and another. Then I finally read the Bible myself to see what it actually had to say. And then that's when I first realized just how many misconceptions there are about Christianity and how few people that talk about Christianity have actually read this, including an awful lot of Christians. It became pretty obvious once I did read it. And this specifically says, don't be a hypocrite. Clearly. It says it a lot, over and over. So yes, us Christians are hypocrites, but it's in spite of Christianity, not because of it. All right. And this ties in with number 3 on misconceptions, which is Christianity promotes violence, or the Bible promotes violence, or religion. More people have died in the name of religion than anything else. Most of us have heard that said before. All right, well, I got a story here that kind of ties in with both of those points, or misconceptions. One of the stories in here, there was a woman caught committing adultery. She was caught in the act. And the punishment for that at that time was for her to be stoned to death. It's pretty severe. Well, the religious leaders then, they did not like Jesus. They didn't like him at all because he kept calling out their hypocrisy. So they were always looking for ways to get him in a lot of trouble. Well, when that woman was caught committing adultery, the punishment was, by the law, she should have been stoned to death. Well, Jesus preached compassion and forgiveness. So when they asked him, what should be done with her? And they asked him specifically to put him in a catch-22. Because if he said, well, don't stone her, let her go, well, then he was telling people, don't follow the law. That would have got him in a lot of trouble. But if he had have said, yeah, she got caught, go ahead and stone her to death, well, then that would have made him a hypocrite because, again, he preached forgiveness and compassion. All right, catch-22 there. So what he said, he actually used hypocrisy against them. He looked at the crowd there, standing there with their stones, just, ready to stone her to death. And he said, let he who was without sin cast the first stone. Think about that. That just took the fun out of everything for all those people. I mean, they just looked down, darn, and just dropped their stones and walked off. And then after everybody left, he looked at the woman and he said, go and sin no more. Okay, so Christianity is not violent, and it is very much against hypocrisy and on the violence part. Us humans were violent. This is back to human nature. And when we do violent things, when we do bad things, it's in spite of Christianity, not because of it. All right, Christianity says one of the basic fundamentals of Christianity is we're all sinners, except for Jesus, and they nailed him to a cross. Christianity says, we're all sinners. Go do better. Quit sinning. Okay, so on the violence part. When we commit violent acts, and again, that's human nature, it's in spite of Christianity. And this is something on the violent part, especially the saying, more people have died in the name of religion than anything else. All right, compared to what? Christians are violent, okay? Compared to what? Christianity promotes violence, okay? Compared to what? Religion leads to violence, okay? Compared to what? Okay, religion leading to violence, all right? That's all religions. Okay, well, compared to what? What only thing you could compare that to is the lack of religion. Well, that would be the communists, because they're anti-religion. They're anti-Christianity, they're anti-Muslim, Buddhists, you name it, they're against it. The communists are anti-religion. All right, so to say more people have died in the name of religion than anything, well, the only thing you can compare that to is the communists. And I'm sorry, the communists have killed more people than anybody. The religious people that murdered and killed were amateurs compared to the communists. The communists in the 20th century took killing people to a new level. Communism's more deadly than the Black Plague. I'm sorry. And when I say that, I mean, seriously, about 25 million people were killed in Europe because of the Black Plague, which was roughly a third of the population at that time. 25 million people, that's a lot. That's horrible. In the 20th century, just the Soviets and the Chinese under Mao, they killed over 100 million people, unestimated. I mean, when we're talking that many people and that many people being murdered and killed and dying and everything else, it's hard to keep accurate numbers. All right. So the communism is more deadly than the Black Plague. They killed 4 times more people than the Black Plague did. So if we're going to talk about violence and killing people, again, compared to what? And that goes back to what I said. It's in our nature to be violent as humans. Always has been. Go back to Cain and Abel in the Bible. Religion, it doesn't promote violence, it restrains us from violence. And I can say that just based on, well, let's look at the societies that got rid of religion. They didn't become less violent. They took killing people to a whole new level that's just completely unimaginable to previous generations. All right, and think about the misconceptions so many young people have about Christianity and religion And then think about their misconceptions about communism. Where does all that come from? Where do those just so obviously wrong misconceptions come from? Anyway, it's just something to think about. Okay, moving on now. Fourth misconception. Christians are snobs. I've heard that one a lot. Matter of fact, I might have believed that one for a while there myself. And by snob, I mean think they're better than everybody else, look down upon everybody else. Well, some are. This goes right back to that human nature thing. But Christianity is very much against being a snob or thinking anybody's better than anybody else. One of the just basic fundamentals of Judeo-Christian belief is we're all equal before God. How can one of us be better than anyone else? And we're all sinners in Christianity. That's, again, basic fundamental. Well, all sins are equal before God. All sins are bad. You can't go around saying, well, yeah, this sin's bad, but this one's so much worse, and this one's worse. Sins aren't ranked in terms of how bad they are by God. They're all unacceptable. So we're all imperfect, and we all have our own issues. Now, this gets a little complicated. One thing about Christianity and Judaism too, and Christianity, by the way, is just a part of Judaism. It's an offshoot of it. Christians follow the teachings of Jesus. Jesus was Jewish. So, just saying Christianity is just an offshoot. And by the way, I've never understood any Christian that had any anti-Semitic thoughts because Jesus was Jewish. So, anyway, if you follow the teachings in the Bible, you're probably going to be better off. Seriously. If you're not out, hitting the bars and the clubs and drinking and partying and doing drugs, you're probably going to be a lot better off than if you are doing those things. And statistically, right now, USA, if you get married before you have kids, if you don't get a divorce, if you graduate from high school, if you do those three things, statistically, you're pretty much guaranteed not to live below the poverty line. Okay, those are graduating from high school. That doesn't have a thing to do with Christianity. But Christians tend to promote learning amongst their kids. Now, we can talk about, the Christians have a lot of questions about what is being taught these days, and that's a whole different topic. But they do promote learning. Christians are less likely to get divorced, and I'm sure the same holds true for Orthodox Jews. Matter of fact, Orthodox Jews are probably even less likely to get a divorce. I'm just guessing. All right. And Christians and Jews, Orthodox Jews that are actually practicing Jews, following what's taught, they're almost certainly going to get married before having kids. So Christians and Jews that are following teachings are usually going to be better off financially than a lot of other people. Okay. And most of us, because the U.S. being an overwhelmingly Christian nation, most European nations were, most of us have the same values, which go back to our Judeo-Christian traditions. Most of us, when we're messing up and we're doing things that are going to hurt us, like the clubs and partying and drugs and all that stuff, we know we're messing up. And one thing I realized back when I was doing a lot of stupid stuff myself, I hate to say it, but I was. I kept doing stupid things, but then I would look at successful people, oh, they're snobs, because they're looking down upon me and what I'm doing. They should have been looking down upon me and what I was doing. I was doing stupid stuff. Just saying. All right, so I don't think, a lot of people, Christians, Jews, anybody, any religion, any society at any time, you're going to have snobs. Communism, where they killed all the Christian people and all the religious people. You still got snobs, people that think they're better than everybody else. All right, that's human nature. But if we look at Christianity, Judaism, the Bible, it's against being a snob. And a lot of us that think of that as snobbery, again, when we think of people looking down on us, in so many cases, not every case by no means, but so many cases, they should be looking down on us because we're doing stupid stuff. If we want to be successful, if we want to get ahead, maybe we should try doing what they're doing instead of just saying, oh, they're looking down upon me. Just something to think about. Number 5. Christians are just a bunch of ignorance, backwoods hillbillies, or hicks, or country bumpkins, or any derogatory term you want to insert here to describe poor country people. And I hear that an awful lot. Okay, first of all, let me point out, a lot of the people that say Christians are just a bunch of ignorant, backwoods hicks, hillbillies, whatever, are so many times the same people that say Christians, well, they're just a bunch of snobs. Okay, you got to pick one or the other because it can't be both. I'm sorry. Poor country people, they don't have enough money to think they're better than anybody else. And I've never met a poor country person that was a snob. Just saying. Okay, and if you refer to poor country people in those derogatory terms, you might be the snob. I'm sorry. Remember all that stuff about being a hypocrite? just saying. Because if you're using such a derogatory term, then you're inferring that you're better than them. Okay. So, with Christians, there are an awful lot of Christians in the world. And we're going to have a little bit of everything just because anytime you're talking about a large group of people, you're going to have all sorts of different people. There are no set defined categories. All Christians can't be snobs, but some certainly are. All Christians can't be, poor country people, but some certainly are. All right, so none of these terms that are often used to describe Christians can apply to all of them, but some will always apply to some. All right. Some Christians are anti-science and knowledge in general. But you can't refer to all Christians as anti-science just because a few are. And similarly, you can't say all Christians are just ignorant whatevers just because, a couple are ignorant. And matter of fact, most of them that you would think of in those terms, most of them are the ones that haven't read this. But at the same time, it's awful obvious a lot of people that are critical of those same people haven't read this either. So anyway, myself personally, and hey, I might even be, fall into that poor country folk category. Certainly was at one time. But there's a lot of good people that are also part of that category. So, all Christians aren't ignorant, backwoods hillbillies, or whatever derogatory term you want to use. The 6th misconception about Christians and Christianity is that Christians just want to tell everybody else what to do. They're authoritarian, in other words. And there's a little bit of truth to that one too. Here's the thing though, it's like so many of the others, this is back to human nature. There's just something in human nature that we want to make others do what we think they should do. Okay, instances of Christian authoritarianism. Prohibition here in the United States. So starting in 1920, alcohol was made illegal and remained illegal until 1933. Well, the movement to make alcohol illegal was led by Christian groups. Now, some Christian groups opposed it, but enough that were for it eventually gained enough political power that alcohol was banned for the entire country. It didn't work out well. And authoritarianism seldomly does. We all see how horrible authoritarianism is. When one group of people is making everybody else do what they think is right instead of letting them choose for themselves. I know that in our modern sophisticated times that it's hard to believe that one group of people would try to force others to do things against their will in the name of the public good. But yes, it's been known to happen. It just seems to be part of human nature. And yeah, we all see the horrors that leads to. And the biggest issue, I think, ultimately, is the people with the authority. They don't face any of the consequences for their decisions. It's the others that face the consequences. But yeah, we see how bad that is. But then, as soon as we're the ones that get the authority, well, suddenly it's okay for us to make everybody do what we think's right. Because, I know better than whoever what's best for them, so therefore it's okay if I make them do what I think is right. Or what is best for the public good. I know better than they do what's best for them and the public good. Yeah, and it always comes back to the public good. Those Christian groups that pushed for prohibition. There's nothing in here that says alcohol's bad. What they were doing was not biblically based in the least. Jesus' first miracle was to turn water into wine. Wine is referenced throughout the Bible many, many times. And it wasn't grape juice. It was wine. And it clearly spells that out when it talks about some people being drunk. Okay. So that movement was not biblically based. It was not a Christian movement. It was just led by a lot of Christians that thought they were doing what was in the best interest of the public good. Yeah. And they had reason for thinking that. Okay, at that time, alcoholism there was much higher rate of alcoholism than now. There were a lot of families that were hurting because of, the father was an alcoholic, beating the kids, families going without. It was bad. All right, so these groups thinking, okay, well, we need to get rid of alcohol. That's the moral good, the right thing to do. Again, even though they were Christian groups, there was nothing Christian about what they were doing. That's the danger of authoritarianism. Okay, now, in terms of Christianity, it's anti-authoritarianism. This book right here is anti-authoritarian because this places all of us under the same authority, God. Yeah, and this gives us a set of rules that we're all held to the same rules. So, and that's another tendency of authoritarianism, those with authority, the old saying, rules for thee and not for me. The rules tend to be for everybody else, not for the ones with authority, which is how they get out of dealing with any consequences for their bad decisions. How many communists in the Soviet Union were tried for murder after, killing 45 million people or so? None. So this is anti-authoritarian. And this makes it very clear we're all equal before God. Okay, and then if you look at where that logic led to, we're all equal in the eyes of God, we're all equal before God, we're all subject to the same authority. Then look at the Declaration of Independence here in the United States and our inalienable rights given to us by God. Our whole concept that government doesn't give rights. God gives rights. All governments can do is take our rights away. And that's the foundation of the whole political system here in the United States. Or that's how it started. And there seems to be an awful lot of sophisticated, educated people that have gotten away from that, that in their mind, the Constitution's pretty much meaningless now. It's just an old, irrelevant document from the past. Well, the thing is, just like so many kings and emperors and so forth from the past, that they wanted to change what this said because it held them to the same standard as everybody else. These old irrelevant documents from the past, they don't change, and they hold us all to the same standard, and there is a tremendous value in that. And that's probably the most anti-authoritarian thing there is. That, along with, we're all equal before God. And finally, the seventh big misconception about Christianity, and that's Christianity is a cult. And Christians are in a cult, and they're just too dumb to know it. And I've heard variations of that. Folks, that's not true. What being in a cult is you're following an individual, a cult leader. I don't know of any cult that's ever existed without a leader. Okay, I'm not following a person, I'm following a book. What I believe to be the Word of God. You might not believe it, that's okay. Either way, though, I'm following a book. And I don't care what anybody tells me. If it goes against what this book says, I'm not listening to them. And that's the great thing about Christianity, what I said before about this being anti-authoritarian, because it gives us all the same standard. It says right here what it's about. All you got to do is read it. Unfortunately, so many Christians haven't read this, and they are subject to being misled by individuals. And they are not thinking for themselves. But that happens to all people. That's not unique to Christians. And if you want to see just a great example of that, look at our modern popular culture. I mean, if you want to talk about individuals being led without thinking by charismatic cult leaders that you can't question what they tell you. Oh, and on a side note, Christians can't question anything or so forth. Christianity is all about questioning. Judaism, Christianity is offshoot of Judaism. One of the central figures of Judaism was Jacob. God renamed Jacob to Israel. Okay. Israel was his name, literally. Israel in Hebrew means he who wrestles with God. God didn't mind being questioned. God wants us questioning. God wants us to ask questions. He wants us looking for the truth. That's why Christianity is not incompatible with science in the least. As a matter of fact, I think that's why science has done so exceptionally well in predominantly Christian nations. Judaism and Christianity both are about the truth and searching for the truth. And struggling to find it because it's not easy to find a lot of times. Well, that's as anti-cult as you can get. So yeah, I'm going to say another big misconception there. I hope you found this interesting, if not just a little thought-provoking. And it doesn't matter if you're an atheist, agnostic, Christian. If you've heard things about Christianity or you got questions about what I just said here, go do the research for yourself. Look it up. If you've heard, all kinds of good and bad stuff, both about Christianity, and you're just wondering, the answers are right here. This is the owner's manual for Christians. And this kind of amazes me. So many will point a finger at Christians. Oh, they just blindly believe what they're told and just take everything on faith. But then those same people will listen to what everybody else tells them about Christianity, and the people that's telling them had never read this either, and they haven't read it. And the book's right here. I mean, it's like it's hard to find the Bible in most Western nations. And you can easily verify what's true and what's not yourself. Okay, but the question is, if you were to pick this up and you read it, and suddenly you realize so much of what you've heard isn't true, which is exactly what happened to me, what do you do then? Okay, there's so many lies out there floating around about what this says and what Christians are and so forth. Where exactly did all those lies come from? Anyway, just something to think about. I hope all of you have a Merry Christmas and have many more Merry Christmases. And God bless all of you, even if you don't believe in it. Have a wonderful day.